Hi, Word Balloon listeners. I'm Margaret Larkin, who John has interviewed for this podcast. I lived in Japan and I love Japanese language, and I want to share a tip for learning it. The language in manga and anime, especially stories that take place in schools, is usually very casual, but Japan has a polite culture, so memorize polite phrases when you go to Japan. For instance, use desu ka when asking directions, such as eki wa doko desu ka, or use arimasu ka when asking biru wa arimasu ka, and don't say anata when you're talking to someone. You can find me on YouTube at Margaret Larkin. That's Margaret Larkin on YouTube.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. It's Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. A quick show note before we get things started. I had a bit of a health scare on the 12th of June and put me in the hospital for a few days. I was released on June 16th. As a consequence, I'm recovering and doing great, but there is fluid around my lungs, which makes it difficult for me to sustain an interview conversation. And I just wanted to let everybody know that's why you're getting some reruns since the 12th. And everything's going to be fine. Don't worry, it just takes a bit for the medication to work and allow me to continue my conversations. The fact that I've been able to talk right now for almost a minute without coughing shows that things are improving fantastically and quickly. So until I do, I hope you enjoy some of these Best of Word Balloon interviews from the past 19 years. And again, I've got great plans coming up. There's great conversations on the way, hopefully before June wraps up, and certainly into July and August. So until then, thank you for your patience, enjoyment, and I hope you will take full advantage of the Word Balloon archive and also these great shows that I am promoting, bringing them back, like this episode today. So you'll listen to the commercials now, and then we'll get into an old conversation from Word Balloon. It's been called one of the top 3 real Comic-Cons in the USA. August 16th through the 18th. Discover Terrificon as it returns to the Mohegan Sun Expo Center in Uncasville, Connecticut. Terrificon showrunner Mitch Halleck has assembled his biggest and best comic creator guest list to date. Jim Lee, Scotty Young, Mark Waid, Adam Hughes, Jason Aaron, Charles Soule, Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo, Brian Azzarello, alongside legends like Chris Claremont, Jerry Ordway, Howard Chaykin, Jose Luis Garcia Lopez, Louise and Walter Simonson, Klaus Janson, Lee Weeks, and dozens more. Terrificon also brings you the actors who have brought your favorite superheroes to life on the big and small screens. Michael Rooker, Charlie Cox, Star Trek actors Walter Koenig, Nana Visitor, Armin Shimmerman, Ethan Peck, Celia Rose Gooding, and many more. That's Terrificon, August 16th through the 18th. For information on tickets and guests, visit Terrificon.com. Word Balloon is brought to you by AlexRossArt.com. Alex is a good friend of the show, and I am honored that he aligns himself with Word Balloon, and good Lord, we all love his iconic art, whether it's for DC, Marvel, things like Monty Python, the Monkees, David Bowie, so many other great licensed things, the Beatles. If you go to AlexRossArt.com, you will find great value for your dollar, whether you can spring for something like original cover art or pages to lithos and posters, every price point you can imagine, you will find something and a beautiful image from AlexRossArt.com. Word Balloon is also presented by my listeners, the League of Word Balloon listeners. The help that I get via contributions from Patreon, patreon.com/wordballoon. You hear the entertainment that I provide from Word Balloon every day, that I do a new episode. I am very fortunate to have the great creators of comics and pop culture willing to come on and give you great entertainment. I hope you will consider making an actual cash contribution via Patreon, even $1 a month. But really, if Word Balloon is worth the price of a comic book a month to you, it would be greatly appreciated if you slide that extra money you would put on an issue of a comic book to Word Balloon via Patreon. Patreon.com/wordballoon. Thank you, League of Word Balloon listeners. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Big Bout Podcast. This is John Suntress. And today I'm really happy to present this conversation from 2003 with the legendary writer Bud Schulberg. Bud was inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame in 2002. He was the chief boxing writer for Sports Illustrated through its formative years. He also wrote a tremendous amount of incredible novels, including What Makes Sammy Run, The Harder They Fall, screenplays like Face in the Crowd. Just a great, great writer, and really one of my favorites, and truly a fascinating man who covered boxing literally up until his last years. This is a guy who saw Primo Carnera and young Stribling fight each other in the 20s, as he tells me, and was a friend of Jack Dempsey because of his father, who ran Universal Pictures, B.P. Schulberg, in the silent era. Up until his death, he covered the Lennox Lewis-Mike Tyson fight a couple years before he passed away. Fascinating guy, and I got to know him through my friendship with Bert Sugar. And in fact, this week marks the anniversary of the Lennox Lewis-Hasim Rahman rematch. And that's when I first got to really talk to Bud. I had met him before a couple times in the 90s through Bert Sugar. But this is where we really got to bond because Bud was getting up there. He was in his late 80s. And we were doing a lot of walking, and the fight was at the MGM. And Bert even said to Bud, said, that's a lot of walking, Bud. Maybe we should get you a wheelchair. Well, Bud was insulted. And it's like, I'm not an old man. Come on, Bert. What are you talking about? I've been walking all day. And he goes, yeah, but Bud, this is going to be a lot of walking. So about 20 minutes later, Bud reconsidered and said, maybe it's a good idea. And Bert said, okay, well, you flag down a waiter as you do in Vegas and pretty much can get anything. And he said, all right, we'll get you a wheelchair. And he goes, well, who's going to push me around? And I was pleased to raise my hand and say, Bud, it would be my honor to escort you to wherever we need to go. And I'm happy to do it, man, truly. So that's what I did. That was kind of my job, along with covering the fight for Sporting News Radio, was to be Bud's gopher, and that was great. I had such a great time, and the three of us laughed all night. After the fight, his kids came to pick him up, and he said, John, what can I do to repay you? And I said, when you have a chance to relax, get on the phone with me, and let's do a full-length interview. And I'm sorry that I didn't take him up on doing more of them. I still had a couple years left at Sporting News Radio where I could have, and just kicking myself that I didn't want to impose. He was such a great guy, and this is a wonderful 50-minute conversation. Bud was the chief correspondent for Sports Illustrated. He wrote a lot of books on boxing, including Sparring with Hemingway, which is a collection of various articles that he had written over the years, a lot of which appeared in Boxing Illustrated. And I'm just a fan. He was incredible, and it was a pleasure getting to know him. And as you'll hear in this conversation, this is a fan conversation. I will not deny it, but I really wanted to get into a lot of interesting ideas with Bud. So I hope you'll enjoy today's presentation of my conversation with Bud Schulberg. It happened 15 years ago in 2003, and I'm happy to share it with you now on the Big Bout Podcast.
We're going to talk about, like I said, your memories of Jack Dempsey. A little bit about Max Baer, if that's okay, and also his connection to The Harder They Fall.
Right.
And I know that you didn't write the screenplay, but obviously you wrote the book, and I want your thoughts on the film.
All right.
And as a personal indulgence, if you would afford me, I would love the opportunity to talk to you as well about A Face in the Crowd.
All right, surely.
Fantastic. Let's start with Jack Dempsey. You were about 13 years old when the Dempsey-Tunney 2 fight happened. If I can go that far back.
That's right. I wasn't there. We, as big fight fans, we followed it on the radio.
So you did listen to it, or you didn't listen to the fight?
I did listen to it. Yes. Oh, yes.
Did you? So you got to meet Dempsey later. When did you become intimate with Dempsey?
Well, he came to our house. My father was. This was in the early 30s, I think. My father was running a big studio then, and he came and met with us. I think we had dinner, and then my mother was really instrumental in introducing him to Estelle Taylor, the actress who became his wife.
Really?
She was a friend of my mother's. Estelle was, and so that was our main connection until some years later, many years later, when he was running the restaurant. And I was covering fights for Sports Illustrated, and I would drop in there from time to time, talk to him.
Was it your father's studio that made the Daredevil Jack pictures he made in the 20s?
No, he didn't. But being a big fight fan, he met and knew Jack.
I see.
But he didn't make those films, no.
Did you ever see any of those films, Mr. Schulberg?
I don't remember seeing them. Nope.
And from my understanding,
no, I don't.
Okay. From my understanding, they may not have been that memorable of pictures anyway.
Probably not. No, I don't think they were.
What kind of woman was Estelle Taylor?
Well, she was awfully attractive, very, very pretty, and at the same time, kind of very homey. She and my mother got along very well, and she always seemed to take an interest in us kids. Three children at our house at that time. Of course, I was much younger, but I remember liking her very much.
Okay. When you started to strike up your friendship with Dempsey when you were writing for Sports Illustrated, had he at that point, was he quite the storyteller? Did he go back and talk to you about the old days and the old fights?
Yes, he did. Yeah, he was almost, I would say that Jack was doing it so much at the restaurant. One thing about Jack in that restaurant was so many fighters I've known who have had restaurants, and they usually failed. And I think the reason that Jack succeeded is that he really worked at it. He sat there at the window. He greeted the customers. He reminisced about his fights and his life. He was very outgoing, and since he really made a job out of talking about it, and he talked about it in a very personable but modest way. That in a way, he reminded me a bit of Rocky Marciano in being so violent in the ring, and so nice and easygoing outside the ring.
Specifically about the Dempsey-Tunney 2 fight, and actually both fights, really, it always seemed like, given what you've just said, too, that he always gave Tunney his due and respected Tunney, certainly, and really liked Tunney as well. When he would talk to you about those fights, was it pretty clear-cut that he felt, Tunney had my number, he could beat me, and would, and obviously did? He
did seem to talk that way. He didn't, the way you might think, he didn't seem to hold any bitterness about the long count. Other people did on his behalf, but I never heard him complain about that. He simply said that Tunney was a master boxer, and simply was able to outbox him, and for the most part, stay away from the big punches. Seemed to admire him, yes, yeah.
Even though you were so young, looking back, and I'm sure you've watched the films yourself in hindsight, do you feel that Tunney got the due in his time as a heavyweight champion? Was he respected enough by the sports writers, by the fans? Certainly he was following a tough act and a very popular hero in Dempsey.
He certainly was. I don't think he ever did get the kind of recognition he deserved. It was somewhat like a Larry Holmes after Ali. There's something about following a legend that diminishes the predecessor. I think also the fact that on top of that, if he had stayed and fought a number of top contenders and made something of the championship, but also retiring so quickly after the fight, after one more fight, I think with Heaney. Mm-hmm. I think that also failed to engage a following or a public.
Could he have beaten the fighters that became champion that followed, the Schmelings, the Sharkies? He was a contemporary, obviously, of Sharkey. He could have fought Sharkey and maybe chosen Sharkey instead of Heaney as his fight after Dempsey.
Well, it's a good question. I think Sharkey was a pretty good boxer for a heavyweight, but I think that Tony, at his prime, and he was still in his prime, would have outpointed him. Yes, I do. And I think maybe the same for Schmeling, because he was also very pretty tough. He went through hell with Harry Greb, who was one of the great all-time middleweights, and he took a terrible beating and came back from that. He had a kind of toughness about him that people don't associate with Tunney.
And also, it seemed, too, that especially in the Dempsey fights, his punches may not have had the power, but they were almost slashing punches that would cut a man up and really rip a man up.
That's right. He beat up a lot of pretty good people that way in the accumulation of punches.
Is it possible, too, that most of his fights were against light heavyweights and middleweights, that too might hurt his credibility as a heavyweight, and he had so few heavyweight fights?
I think that's very true. He barely campaigned as a full-fledged heavyweight. I think all of that mitigates. I should say mitigates, but all of that I think helped to in a sense lessen his legacy.
Did Dempsey ever talk to you about that layoff between 1923 and 1926 and why he took the time off?
Well, he did some. He was having a part of it. I think it was two things. He was having a pretty good time running around, following the girls and all the rest of it. At the same time, as I recall, he was having a pretty bitter battle with his manager, Jack Kearns. And I think part of it was not wanting to make any money for Kearns until that matter had been settled. And I think after a couple of years, it became sort of a habit. He was such a darling of the times. He could really live on his reputation, and so I think it was a combination of those things.
His replacement manager, Leo Flynn, what do we know about him? How much do we know about him?
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm not very helpful on the subject of Flynn. I don't recall much about what he did after he replaced Kearns, who was as colorful as Dempsey, really.
Yes. Oh, definitely. And obviously had quite the career post-Dempsey with fighters like Archie Moore and Joey Maxim.
Yep, that's right, he did.
Let's go back to Dempsey again. And after the Tunney loss, Dempsey went through a series of exhibitions. And in your conversations with him, I almost wonder, because in these exhibitions, he was fighting ranked contenders of the day. Was he flirting with the idea of possibly still fighting, or were these truly exhibitions and just a way to make some easy money and not in a negative way, but just an easier buck where people would just pay to have the privilege of watching Dempsey, much in the way that Jack Johnson continued to box exhibitions until he was 50?
Yes, he did. I know. No, I think that Jack was always kind of flirting with the temptation to come back. And so that it was part staying in the limelight, making some, in a way, easy money. But I felt he was always flirting with the idea that he would really come back again.
There's a story in Dempsey's book that he wrote with his daughter, and I know that some of the facts in there may have been not as accurate, but I'm asking you, if given your conversations with Dempsey, in it, he said that Babe Ruth himself, after the Tunney loss in 26, said, "Do you really want to go on the loss?" And he really credited Babe Ruth as being one of the guys to convince him to get back in shape, have the Sharkey fight, and then obviously subsequently the second Tunney fight. Do you know about that at all?
I'm afraid I don't really know about that.
Okay.
No, I don't. John.
You know, and obviously sports writers of the time, too, you've got to obviously separate some of the fiction from the fact. They were beautiful writers, and obviously you know it better than I do because you were reading them at the time.
Yeah.
And I've certainly read the reprints, the Grantland Rices and that, and they've suggested sometimes that even things like that Benny Leonard was instrumental in helping Tunney develop the proper defense and offense and how to fight at Dempsey. Any knowledge on those stories?
Not a great deal. I had heard that from my father. My father was a very good friend of Benny Leonard, and so I didn't hear it firsthand. But my father told me that Benny was helping Jack and teaching him defense, which Benny was a master of.
Certainly. And you know, Bud, I should put this on the interview as well. Your father took you to your first fight at what age?
11 years old I was. The first time I saw Fidel LaBarba, the going flyweight champion, and a great little fighter called Newsboy Brown, flyweights. I remember it. I still remember it.
Wow. And you've been watching fights ever since, and I think that's terrific. I mean,
ever since, yeah.
Now, what draws people like us to boxing, Bud? You've written about it. You've written about it in fiction. You've written about it in fact. What is it about boxing that really appeals to us?
Well, I think it's for the dramatist. For me, without any question, a major what I call a turning point fight is the most dramatic event in all of sports. In tennis, the winners. If you lose the Australian Open, you're playing next at the U.S. Open and so forth. There's always another. And even if you lose the World Series, team chances are very often will get a chance. Wait until next year. But in boxing, there are times when that is really it, and defines the rest of their life. Just as the Dempsey Tunney fights defined Tunney and Dempsey. When Mike Tyson, if he loses, if he should get knocked out, say, I think it could be the end of the Tyson Tyson drama. There's always that one do or die time in boxing. I've seen it over and over again, in which one fighter goes on and the other one really retires or is never the same again. It's just such a dramatic moment. Also, it's such an intense one-on-one sport. There's no other. Tennis doesn't do it in the same way. It's such an intense challenge. It's so naked, really, literally and figuratively naked sport that there's. I always feel some sense of terror when I go to a big fight, like the one I'm on my way to tomorrow. In fact, it's a sense of I feel almost trembling inside. I fear for the fighters, and there's while I'm a big sports fan and follow, I guess, almost every sport, none of them have that effect on me, dramatic effect that boxing has.
Is it that fear of what might happen that drew you specifically to the Carnera story in writing The Harder They Fall?
Not as much, frankly, John, because in the Carnera story, as I watched it develop with fascination, you knew what was going to happen. You knew that Carnera was going to win. You sensed, if you didn't know, and after a while, I knew that Carnera was a mob control fighter, really almost a puppet in their hands, and that they were pulling all the strings. You knew that, and it fascinated me. As it happened, we were going to Europe in 1929, and the young Stribling was a contender, a pretty good boxer, heavyweight, fought for the title, fought Sharkey and so forth.
Yep.
Young Stribling and his family were on their way to London to fight this giant that they talked about called Conera. And so my father and I went to see that fight in London. I was about 14, 15, I guess.
Wow.
And we knew quite a bit about fights. And we smelled that something was not right in that fight. I think in that fight, in the first one, Sharkey won in on a foul in the 6th round. And then they moved on to Paris a month or so later. And we saw the second one in Paris, in which it was the same thing in reverse with a foul in the 6th round. Conera won. And my father and I knew from then on, really, that in a way the fix was in for Conera. It didn't really happen until Conera came to this country and then was really totally controlled by the mob in New York.
Was that the mob's first foray, then, as far as direct connection to a fighter, rather than what seemed to be the case, at least from my perspective, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like going back to Dempsey and Tunney, the mob's interest was more from the gambling standpoint, Capone being a Dempsey man, and the Philly mob backing Tunney.
Well, that's right. In the Dempsey-Tunney fights and their careers, the mob was only peripherally involved, although there was some shenanigans about the referee in Chicago and Capone's Capone the influence. Tunney also has some kind of shady managerial connection, not that whether we knew about it or not. So there was peripheral mob on both sides, but it was not the total 100% control, owning the fighter heart and soul, and bank account. Most importantly, maybe that was involved in the Conera saga.
Quickly with Dempsey again, if I may, another story that comes up is that Capone basically let Dempsey know and assured him for the rematch, you ain't going to lose in my town, kid. You're going to win. And basically offered to use his influence to fix the fight for Jack, and that Jack, and you tell me if you've heard that story and what Jack's response was to that.
Well, I had heard that. I heard that there were rumors of that, yes, of course, and that Jack absolutely categorically refused to have anything to do with it. It was going to be win or lose, and then was very absolutely straight up.
Did Jack himself ever talk to you about that? Any conversations?
Not quite honestly, about the connections or no connections. Not really. No.
Okay.
I don't think it's a thing he later on really wanted to talk much about. Sure.
And from what I understand and what I've read, he was almost embarrassed by the adulation of Capone.
I think that's for sure. Yeah. Yes, I do. He had been through an awful lot of tough stuff early on, and I had the feeling with Jack that he really aspired to be respectable. He wanted to be admired as someone who would left all that early dark stuff behind.
When you wrote the book in 1947, The Harder They Fall, did you receive any type of flack or any type of real threats? Let's call them what they might be, threats from the mob. Did you hear from the mob or any people? Did people sidle up to you and say and really give any type of veiled threats to you because of what you wrote?
Well, yeah, when the center of the sporting world took Shores, which opened shortly after that, just about that time, like yeah, I used to have trouble in there in Shores by people cussing me out and kind of threatening me in a way. And one claim to fame I have is that Bonnie Ross, the great welterweight champion, he was so infuriated at me when someone, I guess it was Toots, told Bonnie I had written that book. He actually wanted to take me outside. He actually wanted to go ahead and beat me up. People were upset is hardly the word. They were, but it in my own case it got more serious in the book is when I was covering the Basilio-Saxon fight. I think that was 52 and 53, somewhere in there. Okay. And I wrote that fight was clearly fixed for Saxton. Mm-hmm. And I wrote a very, very strong piece titled Boxing's Dirty Business Must Be Cleaned Up Now. And I nailed the fight as a total sellout, and that the Cabo bunch were completely controlling the at that time the welterweights and the middleweights, and next time I went to the Garden, they wouldn't let me in. I was amazed that they even recognized, knew who I was, because writers aren't very well known by their faces. But I was barred from the Garden for some time after that.
Wow, really?
Yes, I was.
My goodness.
Yes, I was. At that time, I did get threats, phone call threats, and stuff like that.
Were you scared? Were you nervous? You took
I was a little nervous. Yeah.
Understandably.
I a bit nervous, but I didn't know what to do about it, so I just kept on going.
Did the Kefauver Commission, did you ever have to speak on behalf of them when they did finally investigate the mob influence in boxing?
No, they didn't call me. They did not call me.
Interesting.
The FBI came to see me, oddly, and asked me what more I knew about mob operations in boxing. But the Kefauver did not call me.
Okay. 10 years after the book was made, Columbia made the film.
Yes.
And we've talked about it before a couple times at fights, and I've asked you about it. You did not write the script.
Well, no, it's not quite that, John. More specifically, I liked and actually had worked on the script, and I liked about 85% of the script. I thought they did it very well. But after I got off the picture, I got into a fight with Harry Cohen, the man who ran Columbia Pictures that was making the movie. Mm-hmm. And I got into a thing with him, and so I was off the picture. And after that, they added two things that without my approval, to say the least, that really shook me. One was that they had, trying to put it in a capsule, but in the film, as in real life, Conera had ostensibly killed pretty good heavyweight fighter, Ernie Shav.
Yes.
And as it turned out, Ernie Shav, because Conner, in spite of his monstrous size, was oddly enough not much of a puncher. Didn't really know how to punch, which is not just brute strength, but knowing it's a science, really, in a way, sports science. And what really had happened is that Max Baer had beaten Shaft very badly, and that Shaft was probably on his way to dying from serious brain damage when he met Conera. In the film, they added a scene that was not in my book or in my script, in which Max Baer says that he deserves the credit for that death, not Toro Molina, who was my character in the movie, and I resented that because I've seen fighters damage other fighters over the years. I had one very good friend of mine, in which he, in a sense, killed an opponent, and never recovered from it. And my experience was that the fighters have a dread. Ezra Charles, the same thing with Ezra, killed a fighter in Chicago.
Yes.
They have a dread that this might happen. It's the last thing in the world they want to happen, and many times they never recover from it. So I resented the fact that they showed up fighters saying that I deserve credit for that death. He didn't kill him. I killed him.
Especially, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And the second thing is that at the end of the film, they added what I thought was a gratuitous moment in which Humphrey Bogart rolls a piece of blank paper in the typewriter, and he types out the title, "The Harder They Fall," and then he types out that boxing must be abolished now. And I caught hell for that because, again, the boxing people naturally, they all assumed that was me writing that.
Sure.
And they were saying, how the hell you keep going to fights and I want to abolish them? And I said, Jesus, I don't want to abolish them. I'd like to see them reformed. I'd like to see boxing, the management of it desperately needs to be reformed, yes, but I'm not about to try to abolish boxing. So I wrote a piece for Sports Illustrated. You could look it up, in which I took the movie to task on those 2 points. But it was not the whole script, John. It was what they did with it, I felt, after I left it.
And I remember, too, you saying that basically the Jan Sterling character replaces the prostitute character in your novel, the sympathetic prostitute. Am I correct in my assumption that she was kind of there to soothe and comfort the fighters?
Yes,
and it's a poignant part in the book.
It is.
I did my homework, but I reread the book. I felt like I was back in school again.
I see you did.
And please explain that wonderful ending that you wrote in the book, if you would, in your own words.
Well, the girl, in a way, prostitute, had been married to a fighter, and the fighter, whenever he won, he'd go out on the town, sometimes celebrating, sometimes he wouldn't show up back home for days. But when he got beat, then he would come home, and she would nurse him and comfort him and try to heal him, and so that she was a person who became a kind of symbol of really female care and concern and healing for battered, beaten people. In the story, it's told by a boxing press agent who, in a sense, is part part of the whole gig that is selling this bogus spider. He feels guilty, very guilty for what he has done. He knows that, in a sense, he's betrayed this man as a human being. The giant winds up battered and broke without any money. They've been stealing all of his money all along while fixing his fights and making him think he's a great champion. And so, in his sense of defeat, he goes back to this woman who is sort of like a great mother figure.
Mm-hmm. And in a sense, he too is kind of a loser that's being consoled by.
Exactly, that was my idea. Yes, that he was a loser and crawling to a cozy corner for comfort. Yeah.
Well, it's a shame they changed the ending because it really does. It puts a wonderful closure to the book, and it's a shame that it's not captured on film. And I know you've described the moment where Bogey is typing and Jan Sterling comes by as almost a dutiful June Cleaver with a cup of coffee by his side. And
yeah, that's right. Yes, yeah. They tacked a sort of a Hollywood ending on it.
Did you know at the time how sick Bogey was when he was making the film?
Yes, I did. Yes, because I talked to him quite a bit. He came east with the director, and they wanted to go to Stillman's and so forth and walk around the fight scene. And I knew he was pretty ill. Yes, yeah. But I didn't really. I guess I didn't realize that he was actually working on his very last film, and that the days were short. But I knew he was ill. Yes, yeah, I did.
And going back to the Baer scene in the film that you disliked, how did Max feel about that? Because not only did as you say was involved with Schaff, but I was talking to Max's son, and he was telling me too that Max was responsible for the death of Frankie Campbell.
He was, yes.
But he was okay with maybe playing the role, and obviously just saw it as a role, and
Frankie Campbell died. By the way, a rather promising fighter up in San Francisco.
But if I may, could you start that quote again? Because I was speaking over you, and I want it clean. So you start the Frankie Campbell story again, please.
Oh, that Frankie Campbell, the brother of the baseball player, of the big league player, what's his name?
Dolph Camilli.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Was a promising fighter up there. So when they told me before that happened that they thought they had a pretty promising boy up there, and Max, the punches killed him. Max was a tremendous fighter. I think he couldn't fight as well as couldn't box as well, and he didn't have the heart of Joe Louis, but he could punch maybe almost as hard as Joe Louis. He was a tremendous puncher. And I think that Max was so happy-go-lucky in the sense he did, just the way his career was handled by him. He really didn't give a damn. He didn't seem to go deep on those things. His brother seems much more of a mensch than Max did. Max was like anything for a laugh.
Right. Well, that's what Junior was telling me. That's what.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and although he did say that after Campbell's death, that he started chain smoking.
Oh, that's interesting. Yes.
And never stopped, and really did till the day he died. How well did you know Max?
Not very well.
Okay.
I met him. My father knew Max Rosenblum very well.
Okay.
And when they were a comedy act for a while there, Max and
Maxie.
Max and Maxie. I knew him through Maxie more.
Okay. Did you ever see the act?
No, I think I was spared that. My father, yeah. No, I didn't.
I was curious because
my father did. I remember my father telling me about it, but somehow I never made it.
Did you get to talk to Max? Were you on set? Were you? I mean, I don't know how that works in Hollywood. Were you on set as they were filming?
On
Harder They Fall.
No, because I was not only not on set. I had a falling out with Harry Cohen,
right?
And Harry Cohen was the Columbia tycoon, so there was no way I could get even near the set.
I got you.
When they were shooting that, no.
So and again, from your standpoint, about 85% to 90%, you're satisfied with the film?
Yeah, I thought they did a good job on the film. I thought they followed the book quite well. They also took a lot of my script. I thought Mark Robson, the director, did a very good job on it. I thought the acting stood up well overall, and Bogey was always good. I thought the what's the name of the
Steiger?
Steiger is always Steiger and effective. Yes, the big wrestler who played Toro.
I don't have the cast list in front of me. But
Rex, it's Lane, Mike Lane. That's the name.
That's right. Yes,
Mike Lane. I thought he did an amazingly sensitive job on it. I was very impressed with him.
And also, it was wonderful to see all the fighters. Not only Max Baer, but Pat Comiskey.
Yeah, that's right. He was. Yeah, and Jersey Joe had some. Jersey Joe Walcott had lines in it too. A
very significant supporting part is George. Yeah.
Yes, he did. Yes, it was. He was, and as I've always found that in the work I've done in films, I've always tried to get fighters in as much as I can. That maybe because they are performers, and it's interesting that so often when they're interviewed, as you know, they will discuss it as my performance. Floyd Patterson always graded his performance. So in a sense, they are performers, and they're used to being seen in public and in a way acting out, which the basis for the being effective actors, as we found with The Waterfront, and
sure,
and in a film I did called Wind Across the Everglades, I had Tony Galento in it in a fairly good part also. And they come through.
Are we okay for time, Bud? Or am I keeping you from anything?
Just about to wonder. I could, John, take a few more questions.
Okay, I won't keep you much longer. I appreciate.
Around 3:30, I should.
Okay. All right.
Well, get on with things, but.
Okay, then yeah.
I'll be glad to try to answer any.
Okay, and
anything else that's on your mind.
And if we could follow up, because also this year is the 40th anniversary of the first Liston Patterson fight. I won't trouble you today with that.
Yes.
But it is something that I would like to cover, and if we could rearrange another time to talk about that would be great.
All right, we could do that. Yes.
Okay. Let me finish up then and ask you quickly two things. One, in your encounters with Gene Tunney, you said you had a few. What kind of man did you take him for? How did he appear to you as meeting him and talking with him?
I saw him only socially, like a few cocktail parties and things at 21 and various places. I didn't really know him. I truly didn't know him on a strong one-on one situation. The only thing is that when he reviewed The Harder They Fall for the Saturday Review, he reviewed the novel.
Okay.
And he reviewed it very, very enthusiastically. Said it was the most authentic book ever written on boxing and so forth. And so I did get a chance to thank him for that review. And I also told him I thought it was pretty well written.
From my understanding, he was quite a good writer. I read his excerpts from his accounts of his Dempsey stuff, and really doesn't get the credit for being a sportsman, for being quite his own writer.
Yeah, that's right. He was extremely intelligent, and he if he had wanted to be, could have been a sports writer, I think, too.
Okay, let's finish up then with my favorite movie in just a couple minutes on A Face in the Crowd, which
right.
I absolutely love that movie, Bud, and I really think that Andy Griffith's performance shows what kind of range he has as an actor, and everyone can laugh at Sheriff Andy, and by all means deserves all the credit for the Andy Griffith Show in Matlock, his gospel singing career, his Broadway performance in No Time for Sergeants.
Right.
But to show such range and such darkness in Face of the Crowd was just incredible.
Yes, it was. It really was. Because I don't know if it's tales out of school or not, but Kazan said to me, he said, but we have to work on Andy day and night. We have to, I mean, he's got that side. I know he has that side in him. I felt it in talking to him. But we have to keep hitting on him, reaching in and pulling that out. And he said, I'll work on him all day, and you go out drinking with him all night. And we just work on the serious impact of this, what it can be. And he certainly came through. He came through, but he never really wanted to do anything like that again, frankly.
Really? That's a shame, because I think he really missed an opportunity to show real range and real balance as an actor.
He had tremendous power. He really showed it, and that's undoubted. The amazing thing about that is that film got won not a single nomination. It got no attention, very little at all. I would have thought that Andy, such a breakthrough performance as that, had to be nominated, but completely overlooked.
Well, and the story is really one of the forgotten Kazan-Schulberg collaborations, I think, and sometimes people really do have to be reminded, because as I'm going to ask you, the story resonates today and could very easily be made today. The theme of the story still is powerful, the corruption and how easily these tin-plated gods are created by television and by the mass media, and the power they wield.
That's true. It is true. It's true and more than ever, I think. Really, I do. And is a real danger in our country of that kind of power, sometimes for the wrong reasons, can be wielded. They're talking about right now. They're talking about remaking it over at Warner Brothers.
You had told me a couple of years ago that Jim Carrey was possibly looking at it, and I had heard that he wanted to look at it, but also wanted to be able to kind of manipulate the script. And I found that kind of interesting, given the body of your work, that, Ace Ventura, the clown, really had the kind of nerve. I took exception to that and said, wait a minute. I think you wrote a hell of a script, Bud, and I really don't think there's any need to change much in terms of modernizing it.
I know. I hear now, got a call the other day that Will Smith is now interested in doing it.
Wow.
And I'm hearing the same rumors about fiddling with that and fiddling with the ending and so forth. I'm asking him to send me the script.
Do you have enough power to be able to refuse and say, no, not that way, and you'll do it my way or no way?
Sadly, John, I wish I did, but I really don't. The way those contracts read, or at least as Edwin read, I'm afraid that they control it. That they can remake it. I don't think I have. Only power I have is a kind of moral persuasion. Try.
Good luck.
Yes.
It's
yes.
Hollywood. Good luck.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna let you go. Two things real quick, though. First of all, yeah, if we can reschedule in a month or so, I would love to talk to you about Floyd Patterson and Sonny Liston.
All right, I was there, yeah.
And also your wonderful story in your encounter with Ernest Hemingway.
Oh, yes.
Which really is a great, and I read it in Boxing Illustrated, and of course bought your book as well. And also, but I quickly want to give you the opportunity to plug anything that you may have in print right now that you would like to make people aware of. Or I do know that Ben Stiller is finally making What Makes Sammy Run. I had read that that's a movie that's being prepared for 2003. Is that correct?
Yeah, I just talked to Ben the other day and talked about the script. Some things that I'd like to see improved, and we're talking about that. He's extremely receptive, I must say. He's being very cooperative, and that's going very well.
So are there any like books that you have currently in publication? I can mention, I know that recently there was a biography written about you, and I don't know what your feelings are on that if you want that acknowledged. But basically, yeah, I always like to afford my guests the opportunity to plug their products as a postscript, much like Charlie Rose does, or NPR.
Yeah, yes. Well, Nick Beck has just put out a book on me, which pretty much outlines all the work, all the work I've done. I was appalled myself to find in the back a list of everything I published, and I thought, Jesus, I should have. Maybe I should have written that much. About 100 articles I had forgotten. I think that had been appearing in magazines. The Random House has just republished What Makes Sammy Run, my first novel. They just republished it as a kind of, they're celebrating their 75th anniversary and choosing to republish a couple of dozen of their favorite books over that period. And Sammy is one of those books
that's wonderful.
Just coming out again.
That's one. Okay, it isn't out yet, but it is coming out soon.
Well, it's out, I think, just about now.
Okay, I'll check on Amazon on that and find out, and I'll check on the internet or call Random House themselves and see what schedule that's on.
All right, fine.
But I appreciate your time. This has really been a pleasure, and really, I think the world of your work, and really have enjoyed reading you for years. And it's been such a pleasure through Bert getting to know you and getting to meet you, and really, I can't tell you how much your work has inspired me as a writer, and now I'm more of a broadcaster. But really, you and Liebling were my two guys.
Well, you put me in very good company, John. I appreciate that.
Well deserved, sir. You truly are. You're one of my favorites. And again, I look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you very much.
Next August 9th marks the 10th anniversary of Bud's passing. I'm glad I got to know him in the couple years of hanging out with him at big fights in New York and in Vegas, and wonderful conversations on the phone. I wish I had interviewed him more, as we suggested at the end of that conversation. Unfortunately, we didn't. I didn't want to bother him. I mean, he was a gentleman in his late 80s, and sometimes, the next thing you know, it's been more than months and even years before you talk to the man again. So I'm glad to present this great conversation that I had with him here today on the Big Bout Podcast. Thanks a lot for listening. I really hope that you're passing it on to your friends that are also boxing fans, so that you like the Big Bout Podcast, and hope to let people know about it. So thanks a lot for listening today. This is John Suntress. The Big Bout Podcast is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions, copyright 2018.